Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our first event for this very exciting Innovation Week. Behind the curtain, a look at the conversation. So my name is Tim Bright, and I'm the Events and Activations Manager at Melbourne Connect at Melbourne University. And we're thrilled to provide a supporting role in this event today. And it's only supporting. All the work has been done by the terrific event partners that are delivering events. So I was hoping to do a quick introduction. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the lands of the Wurundjeri people that I'm on. So at the University of Melbourne, we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri people who have been custodians of this land for over 40,000 years. Now, the university has a number of campuses all around Victoria too. So we acknowledge and pay respects to those traditional owners of our other campuses and to those whose land it is, wherever you're joining us from today. So I will only say a quick couple of things. First of all, this is one event of about 20 or so happening over the next 3 days. So if you're interested in this sort of content about collaboration and innovation, please check out the website at Innovation Week at Melbourne Connect. Just Google it. There's plenty of ways to connect beyond today as well. We've got a Slack channel where we've got people from all the 20 events, over 3,000 people joining us. And we thought that you might enjoy participating in that community as well throughout the next few days. If so, check the emails that we sent through, and there's the link through to there, and we hope to see you on there. After all of that, we hope that you can meet us at the precinct ourselves when we're allowed to get back to work. So hope we can see you there. We do all these events all the time, and we love to build the community and welcome lots and lots of new people. So having said all that, I'd like to throw to Ali, who will take things from here, introduce all the important news that's going around, and lead the event for the rest of this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Tim, and good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. As Tim said, I'm Ali Hanson. I'm the Chief of Staff at The Conversation, and we've got our editors on the line here from almost every state and territory in Australia, so I wanted to acknowledge the lands of the many lands on which we meet today for the traditional owners. Just to explain what we're doing here today, every Monday we have an all-in news conference where all 9 sections of The Conversation are in the same room to notify the rest of the team of 3 main things. The first thing is any big events that are coming up in their sections for the week. It might be a big scientific report is coming off embargo, there's an election somewhere, or maybe their portfolio minister is speaking at the press club. So you'll hear the editors say in the week ahead. The second thing is items of breaking news today and how they plan to cover it. It might be that it's a story that we've covered in the previous few days, and they might want to resurface that piece. It might be that they're looking for input into fresh angles, or it might be that once conference is over, they're going to hit the phones and start bringing around academics to maybe interview them for a fast turnaround piece, which is what we like to call a phoner, or to get them to write a piece to file at an agreed upon time. So you'll hear the editors say chasing or in the news today. The third thing is the stories they plan to publish in the next 24 hours. So each section will have a piece go up on the site at some time today. That's what the editors will call their PM story. And they'll have one prepared to go with our morning newsletter for tomorrow morning, and that's what they'll call their AM. Editors, if I forget to introduce you, please remember to introduce yourselves. And for the attendees, if you have any questions throughout the conference, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom, so you can just type your question in there. And I'm told you won't see your question pop up, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't gone through. I'll start just with a few in-house messages. A big thanks to Nicole for being acting Chief of Staff over the weekend. And I just wanted to say a really, really big thank you to Nicole and Anthea for their incredible IPCC coverage last week. It was a really huge report. It was really easy to understand, so comprehensive, and you've still got stuff coming. So a massive thank you for that one. Our top reads over the weekend, number 1 was the unhealthiness of Uber Eats, thanks to Phoebe. Number 2 was how COVID affects the heart. Number 3 was John's education piece, Einstein was wrong, not your science teacher. And number 4 was Grattan on Friday. which is a good segue to go over to Michelle Grattan, who's on the line. We usually start with Michelle to tell us everything that's coming up in the week for Oz politics. Oh, sorry, you're just on mute, Michelle.
Just before we go to Michelle, Sunny, do we need to, sorry, Ali, do we need to let Sunny go so she can interview Blaxland?
Yep. Did we want to do a quick chat about Afghanistan before Sunny heads off then?
Okay.
Yep. Did you want to kick off then, Amanda? Sorry, we've got Amanda Dunn, Justin Bergman and Judith Islander on our politics desk. And Sunny does breaking news, so they're working together on Afghanistan coverage this morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, so we're planning to put together quite a big package on Afghanistan. So I'll let Sunny, Justin and Judith tell you about their pieces because they have each got one coming.
Great.
Thanks very much, and sorry to dive in. My name's Sunny. I'm based in Sydney, and I'm cover a range of things, including breaking news. So just to explain, the only reason I'm diving in is because I really am keen to interview John Blaxland, who is one of our great authors who knows a lot about Australia's military interventions and history and so on. And he has agreed for me to do a very quick phone interview with him at about 9:10. I'm going to then turn around that piece and help him draft a quick turnaround piece that hopefully we can get up by about 10 or 10:30. And it's looking at this moment in Afghanistan as sort of a Saigon moment. You know, there's talk of people sort of trying to, 1,000 people trying to get on a plane that fits 300 people, just trying desperately to get out. And so the question is really, what's Australia's moral responsibility there to help people get out? What's being done and what might the future hold? And I just had a really brief chat with him. He says there's actually quite a lot happening behind the scenes on that front, but yeah, definitely there is more that needs to be done. And it's a question worth asking at this moment.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Honey. Well, if you need to jump off to go on.
Yeah, I might jump off and then I'll jump back in once I've spoken to him.
No
Thank
worries.
you.
Thanks, Honey. And Justin.
Hi, so I've got two pieces that are ready. I'm sorry, they're already in. And sorry, I'll introduce myself again. I'm the deputy politics editor here. One is by William Maley, who's one of the best Afghanistan experts that we have in Australia, and he's written a lot of books on this subject. So he's taking a big picture view at the U.S. kind of failure here and why Biden should or should not be shouldering a lot of the blame, and diving into whether this is a big moment, like a critical moment of marking the U.S. decline in the world that we can kind of look back on in history. The second piece I'll let Jude brief on, which is about the women.
Hi there. Good morning, everyone. I'm Judith Ireland. I'm also a deputy editor in the politics team. I've got a gender, peace and security expert from Monash University. Her name's Jenna Sapiano, and she is writing for us on this really awful, dire situation for women and girls in Afghanistan. We did have a piece out of the US this morning that we brought across in the newsletter on this. So just the thing I'll be looking for is to differentiate the pieces. But yeah, what's the situation this group of women and girls are facing? What can they do? What can we do? I guess we're trying to look for some silver linings in all of this because it's pretty scary. So again, that'll be something we get up as soon as we can today, but it'll also be for tomorrow as well. So
has she already filed?
She has filed, yes.
Okay.
And she was working with another author who's actually got a lot of in-country experience. So the other author is an Afghan lawyer who is now a PhD student in Melbourne. And she used to work with the Afghan president's office and with the Human Rights Commission. So she has a lot of experience. But unfortunately, when I reached out to her a couple of weeks ago, she was just about to give birth. So she agreed to co-author with this other expert and provide her knowledge and research. So it's great to have this piece, but it's taken a while to kind of get going.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. All right. They're terrific for today. I've just got a couple of other things for sort of the week ahead that would be good going forward. Could we get something on kind of the organizational makeup of the Taliban? Like there's no one leader. So kind of what will it look like for the Taliban to be leading Afghanistan? And also, can we get something, was the war just pointless? Now that this has happened, have all of those, excuse me, like, was all of that money and all of those lives to waste? I wonder if we can get someone to reflect on that.
I've got one.
We can do that, Ali.
Yeah, I just have one author, another Afghan scholar here who's reached out, so he might be able to do the Taliban piece. I could ask him.
Just one quick idea. Have you, Justin, or anybody spoken to Kevin Foster at Monash?
No.
He wrote a book, I think in about 2013, called What Are We Doing in Afghanistan? And it was mostly about the media reporting of what was going on, but he's quite an expert on the war there. And I think he'd be an interesting person just to see what his thoughts are, because I think he's been very doubtful about the operation all the way through.
And the women and girls piece sounds good. I wonder, would they be able to tie in a little bit of sort of more generally speaking? There were reports today that, they'll be like, they ban music and they ban media and all that kind of stuff. Would they be able to tie some of that into the women and girls piece?
Oh, look, I'll try and do that. So some of the broader social restrictions. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That would be excellent. Terrific. Thanks, guys. All right. If that's all on Afghanistan, I might go to Michelle now.
Thanks very much, Ali. Michelle Grattan, political correspondent. The stories here this week will be Afghanistan and COVID. And just on Afghanistan, I think the whole question of our processing of people is quite important and worth exploring. The government does say that a lot's going on behind the scenes, and obviously the actual operation has to be fairly much shrouded in secrecy. But the issues of processing, you might remember that Peter Dutton a while ago was worried about extremists getting in, which seemed somewhat excessive. However, the government does make the point that if you're talking about people who helped Australians in 2010, for example, it's a long time ago and it's hard to know exactly what's happened in terms of these people's activities, beliefs and so on. It's a sort of place where people change sides quite a lot. So processing is difficult. I did hear someone this morning talk about the possibility of doing that in a third country, which obviously has problems too, but an issue worth exploring, as is indeed Australia's aid effort over the years. Who are the aid workers there and what have they found? I remember when the embassy was closed, we talked to one or two of these people, and I think they have very interesting stories, especially if they're already out. And just another idea on Afghanistan, I see on Twitter a couple of people were making the point about the really bad Australian media coverage of what's been happening in the last few weeks. And I think that it just shows that the media these days are a lot less interested in what happens outside our shores, frankly. And clearly this story has been building for weeks, months, and yet you see practically no coverage until now, the absolute crisis point. And I think one of the people was saying, you'd expect the ABC to have much more of a live coverage of what was happening in Kabul. Now, going to COVID, which is, of course, what's preoccupying us most here in Canberra, I think that you'll see this week more debate about the states going their own way and, of course, how the crisis is evolving, particularly in New South Wales. There's no parliament this week, but nevertheless, a lot of politicians, including the Prime Minister and Anthony Albanese, are in Canberra, stuck in Canberra, they'd probably say. And we do have a podcast lined up with Albanese for Wednesday. So if anyone has any killer questions, please let me know. That's all from me, I think.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Michelle. And then the only other thing I sort of noticed over the weekend that would be a politics story, obviously not for the next couple of days with Afghanistan happening, but the only thing that was of interest was Mark McGowan saying that he will require people to WA to have either 1 or 2 vaccines and to be able to show proof. And I just thought going forward, that could be a good one to get perhaps Anne to talk about the constitutionality of that. But yeah, perhaps just
Ellie, I actually have a couple of PM stories as well.
Oh, great.
So the first one that I have is last week there was some legislation quietly passed in the Parliament, which was about, sorry, not passed, put up in the Parliament, which was about kind of the old established parties having control over their party name, which would stop, they have a sort of power of veto over other groups using it. So, for example, the name Liberal or Labor, which would stop other groups from using it in their name. So that has quite big implications in electoral terms when it comes to parties on ballot papers. Graham Orr has written a piece for us saying that it's not legally very strong either. It's got a lot of holes in it. So I'll get that piece up as soon as possible. The second piece that I have is our media expert, Dennis Muller, who is writing on the 9 newspapers' decision to stop taking ads from Clive Palmer on the basis of COVID misinformation. So he's been running some ads, which is sort of anti-lockdown ads, basically. And they were taking quite a lot of heat on this on social media. And so last week they made the decision that they would stop doing it. So Dennis is going to look at what are the sort of ethics around this. Where do you draw the line in terms of the kind of advertising that you accept, given that, you know, newspapers obviously are in pretty straitened times and need all the advertising they can get. But nonetheless, they do need to draw the line somewhere. So I'll get that piece up as soon as possible as well.
Excellent. That sounds terrific. And that's all from politics, Amanda?
That's all, yeah.
Great. And I'll throw now to Carissa Lee, who's our Indigenous and Public Policy Editor.
Hey everyone, my name is Carissa Lee. I'm a Wimawima and Noongar woman based in Melbourne. So the piece that I'm hoping to get ready for today is looking at the COVID-19 crisis in Western New South Wales with Aboriginal communities there. There's been some outbreaks, particularly with kids. So got a piece coming up there looking at how the bit of a botched situation with New South Wales going into lockdown a little bit late has resulted in this happening over in Walgana and some other places. Hopefully getting a piece ready for tomorrow on the trial for the murder of Mr. Walker that happened in the Northern Territory. And there's a piece that I'm hoping to get out this week looking at a response to the government strategy of compensation for the stolen generations. And that's all from me.
Oh, great. So which one is that that's going up this week on the stolen gens?
This is the one looking at the strategy that would be more effective if these folks were wanting to do decent compensation for the stolen generations, rather than only addressing some of the states to try and get all of them. It's a really good piece.
Great. Was that the Steve Larkin one?
No, that was Peter Reid.
Peter Reid, okay. And there's another piece coming as well, though, isn't there?
Yeah, as far as I know, Steve Larkin's going to be doing one as well. Just waiting to hear back.
Okay. All right.
Can I just ask a question here, Ali? Is it possible in the piece about Western New South Wales to get a table or any data about the rollout in Indigenous communities? Because it does seem to be very bad and it's not totally clear why it's bad, to what extent this is New South Wales government inefficiency, federal government botching of the whole thing, vaccine hesitancy. For example, in the Northern Territory, I heard a few weeks ago that some fundamentalists were out campaigning in these Indigenous communities saying, God will look after you, don't get the vaccine. So some data about what the situation looks like in terms of coverage would be good. I know it might be hard to get, but presumably the health department or the Aboriginal health services peak body would have some material on that?
I think the Northern Territory has actually gone up with their vaccination rates because a lot of mob have taken it on themselves to go out in community and basically drag people into their clinics. So it's really good. But yeah, I didn't realise that they had God botherers getting involved. But yeah, the New South Wales piece that we're working on, they do have some information about what's causing vaccine hesitancy. However, yeah, it would actually be really good to try and get a table looking at.
Yeah, a table always looks good.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, Sean.
Yeah. Fron might also have some ideas where we can find that data, and Cynthia will be able to help you put the table together.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. And that's all from you, Carissa?
Yep, that's all from me.
Terrific, thanks. All right, I'll throw now to business and economy, which is Peter Martin in Canberra and Tim Wallace in Melbourne.
Good day, Peter, business and economy editor. Two things of note coming up this week, both of which we will roll into one piece. Wages and employment. We get the quarterly wages figures. Most recently, they were about the lowest ever growth, 1.5%. That'll be updated Wednesday lunchtime. Thursday, we get the unemployment figures, which are monthly, but this is the month that Australia, well, half of Australia went into lockdown. And they were doing unbelievably well, down 4.9%. Some people are saying they'll go up to 5.5%. I caution that last year, when we went into lockdown, they in fact didn't go up the first month. There's sort of an inertia. It's a bit like, that cartoon character who's running over a cliff and just keeps running. So maybe not. Richard Holden will do both of those for us. He'll finalise it when the figures come out, the employment figures on Thursday, and we'll run it Thursday afternoon, even though we normally run his piece of Vital Signs on Friday. As soon as it comes out, so maybe 3 Thursday afternoon. The big thing that I and Wes, our graphics whiz, are working on is the Economists survey. We do this with the Economic Society of Australia. They pick the questions. They pick the 70 people in the panel. We usually get about 60 of Australia's leading economists taking part, including members of the Reserve Bank Board, all sorts of important people. This one, they couldn't have picked a better topic. How do you get vaccination rates up? There's a list of 5 options, which we have randomised. So each one gets them in a different order. Ad campaigns, cash incentives, lotteries for cash or prizes, vaccine passports, mandatory vaccination or nothing. So far, we've got 32 responses in. Curiously, from my point of view, 2 people have said nothing. It just goes to show they believe in, I don't know what they believe in. So Wes and I put that together with graphics, a Wes Mountain cartoon at the top on Thursday and Friday. Responses are due by Thursday. And we're publishing that Monday morning. And Ali, all being well, I would like it to lead the newsletter, if possible.
All not being well, Wes has had to take some leave this week. So either you can work with Cynthia on the tables and forego the Wes Mountain cartoon, or we can push publication back.
No. It's good to publish it near the when the people respond. Wes will be able to tell, or she'll be able to look up how he does those tables.
Yeah.
We also publish as an incredible service. We publish the answers of every economist. They give reasons why in full, for paragraphs and paragraphs in tabs, so it doesn't take up much room. And my deputy Tim Wallace has tomorrow's story.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm Tim Wallace in Melbourne. I'm Peter's deputy. For AM, a piece looking at why the proliferation of video streaming services, with the latest one in Australia being Paramount Plus, why these may drive us to greater piracy. So it's going to be a bit of an economics lesson on the fundamental economic dynamics of the video streaming market and how it differs from music in particular.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. And
We're
that's all from
curious.
Victor. Sorry, Peter, you've
He was going to say he's curious about something, but I'm not sure what he's curious about.
Well, we'll have to remain curious about
He's
what
curious about many things.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Peter. And I'll throw now to Health and Medicine with Section Editor Fron Jackson-Webb and her deputies Phoebe Roth and Liam Pedersen.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, on our chasing list today, now that New South Wales has finally gone into the statewide stage 4 lockdown, I want to get something comparing the numbers from Victoria's second wave and New South Wales second wave. So something that looks at kind of the case numbers at this stage, how long it took to come back from that peak, or where Victoria peaked, how long it took to come back. But probably most importantly, the differences with Delta. So why we can't just, put the numbers next to each other and assume that the same thing will happen. Yeah. So I'll try to...
Are they saying that New South Wales has now peaked? We obviously had the huge number over the weekend and now they've gone into full lockdown. Have they said whether they think case numbers will still go up or whether that was likely to peak?
I think case numbers are likely to keep going up for a while before it peaks.
Okay.
I think, but I'm not sure how long they will rise for before going down.
Yeah.
So this piece will hopefully look at that.
Great.
So just one chasing item from me. Phoebe and Liam have more, but I'll just mention a global series that we're running that's with conversation outlets in France, Spain, UK and US. So basically we're looking at how various countries around the world have handled COVID in the pandemic. Tomorrow morning, we'll run a piece from Singapore. So they've got 74% vaccination at the moment. They're looking to get to 90% next month. So that's the best in the world. So this will look at, what they did, how they're tracking. Their response has been quite similar to us, but there are some differences, including not opening up dining, interestingly. And compared to the UK, they're not having a big kind of freedom day. They're just kind of, taking it very slowly and steadily. And it also looks at how well prepared they were because of the 2003 SARS outbreak. So this piece basically says that their preparedness started in 2003, so they were way ahead many other countries. So that will be for tomorrow morning. We've also got a piece coming in from Mike Toole on China, which will probably go on Wednesday. And then next week, Martin LaMonica from TC US will put out a newsletter with all of the country profiles. And I think we'll probably have about 15 in total for that.
Oh, great.
So that's it from me. I'll pass over to Phoebe now.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. I'm one of the deputy editors on the Health and Medicine section. So Fron mentioned I had a chasing item. It's something we actually think we're inclined to leave alone, but just wanted to run it past you, Ali. The idea was perhaps an explainer on pneumococcal meningitis in light of the 15-year-old in Sydney who died and who had COVID as well. But we just thought maybe given the sensitivity and the tragedy surrounding that situation, we might leave that one. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think fine to leave that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just mention my PM in that case, and I think it will actually go really nicely alongside Carissa's piece for this afternoon. So it's on the distribution of COVID vaccines to remote Indigenous communities. Basically, the authors have put together a video which shows the journey of vaccines from the supply centre out to the remote communities. And so the piece looks at issues including the long journey and the challenges with that in keeping up the cold chain requirements for the vaccine, looks at different challenges that can come up when getting out to these communities like power outages, kind of extreme weather events, things like that. So it's a bit of a look at the logistical journey of vaccines to these remote communities and hooked to the news with COVID getting out to those communities in New South Wales.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Phoebe. And Liam.
Hi, I'm Liam from Melbourne, another deputy editor in the health team. So in terms of chasing, I wanted to chase something a bit zoomed out that I've been thinking about for a while, which is basically on our overall COVID policies. So there seems to be two broad camps, one of which is elimination, like COVID zero, and another one is the idea that we need to live with the virus, or at least have some small number of cases bubbling along that we can manage. And I think it seems to be the battle that's like at the heart of a lot of our arguments in the public at the moment. And I just think it would be really interesting to get someone to kind of explore that for lay readers. Obviously not someone who's staunchly in one of those camps, but if I can find someone who can sort of, explore that for lay readers in a way that helps them make sense of that whole debate, I think it would be interesting. So I'll see how I go.
Yeah, that'd be great. Given Gladys over the weekend has said she doesn't think they're likely to get to zero, I think that'll be a really important piece this week.
Yeah, that sounds good. And the Prime Minister also said this morning, I think, or maybe it was last night, that that states who keep going for COVID zero in the long term will be undermining the economy. So, which is kind of weird because last week he said that short, sharp lockdowns were the best way to deal with the virus. So I'm not sure how that fits in, but in terms of today, for the PM, I'll have a story that didn't quite make it on Friday about how to remove COVID aerosols in hospitals. So last year in Melbourne, we had, unfortunately, a huge number of healthcare worker infections, particularly in hospitals, but aged care too. But this group of researchers has been focusing on ventilation and those sorts of things since then. So they've sort of found one key finding was 2 small portable air cleaners can clean 99% of infectious aerosols in a room within 5.5 minutes. So they did all these studies at Royal Melbourne to see what worked best, and that was one of the best things. And they also touch on some other methods as well. And that's it from me.
Excellent. Thanks, Liam. And I saw you guys were chatting a bit about kids this morning. Can you just let me know what we're thinking on that? Because it just, I mean, the vaccines are still not approved in kids, but it seems like COVID's affecting kids more and more. And so, are they going to be fast tracked, or is it still not a priority because kids aren't getting sick? What's happening?
I still don't think it will be. There's still a lot of discussion about whether or not we should prioritize kids. And I think, there's a lot of division with probably half of experts saying, no, we shouldn't. We need to, make sure all the vulnerable groups are done. We need to really tackle that 18 to 39 group. We should look at, sending spares overseas because we're not covered until everyone's covered. But Phoebe's talking to Natasha Yates about that kind of preschool age group.
Natasha is more keen to look at school-aged kids. Sunny was chasing something on daycare kids, given that they're still allowed to go to daycare, whereas schools are closed. She wanted to particularly look at those younger kids and the risk to them. And so I think she's chasing something separate there.
Yeah, you say what you've got, and then I'll update.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know if you were back, Sunny, because you weren't up on my screen. So I've got 2 pieces coming up on kids. So the one is Natasha Yates, and she's going to look at what parents can do to protect, what parents and schools that are open can do to protect school-aged kids, and we'll hook that to the rise in cases in kids. And I've also got one on vaccines in the younger age group, so 6 months to 12 years. Where are we up to? What does the evidence say on that? When are they likely to be approved? So that's Nick Wood filing on Wednesday.
And so do either of them sort of go through what's happening with these kids? Like, as in, they're getting it, they might be transmitting it, but they're not necessarily getting really sick? No?
No, I mean, neither of the pieces are written, so I can ask one or both of the authors to please cover that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just on that, Phoebe, in my phone conversation last week with Asha Bowen from the Telethon Kids Institute, she said, while it's true we are seeing a number of kids with COVID, and some of them even are in hospital, they're actually presenting to hospital with other things. Like they might be getting there with like a broken arm and then they've got a runny nose, so they get a standard COVID test and then, oh, they've got COVID, but they're not actually being hospitalized for COVID. And according to her, even if a child gets Delta, they're unlikely to get so sick that they need anything beyond care at home. Yeah, and she said that there's a study in the Lancet talking about how Delta affects kids and also data from the UK. So that was a piece I was trying to get up. Like, if my kid gets Delta, how worried do I need to be? And I haven't had any luck on that. So yeah, if Natasha wants to draw on that stuff, I think parents and readers would be very interested.
Yeah, for sure.
And Ali, just to mention, we're also chasing a piece on long COVID in kids.
Oh, yeah, great.
And so, I mean, there is a lot of discussion about how prevalent that is, but it seems like it's around kind of 5% of kids have kind of longer term symptoms.
And is that less than the adults that get long COVID?
I think that's about 10%, yeah. So, I mean, the figures jump around. Some estimates are 10% for kids, 20% for adults, but it seems about half for kids. Is that your take on it, Liam?
Yeah, I think it's definitely less in kids. I think the problem, and something I was reading earlier today on Twitter, is that it's so like loosely and poorly defined at the moment. So it's so hard to get accurate figures on actually what we're talking about is actually defined as long COVID. But yeah, I think it is less in kids, but I think it's definitely still emerging, which is why a lot of the researchers I've spoken to have been hesitant to write yet, but still chasing something, so hopeful.
Yeah. Right, excellent. Thanks so much, guys. And I'll throw now to our New Zealand desk with editor Finlay McDonald.
Sure, Australia. Apologies from my co-editor, Veronica. She's got food poisoning, unfortunately. I too am chasing a piece specifically on New Zealand's moral responsibilities in Afghanistan. It seems like we've been extremely slow, our government has, in offering assistance to the contractors and translators that were working with our provincial reconstruction team. There's a couple of authors here that would be good on it. Whether I can get them in time, I'll keep you posted about where we get to with New Zealand on that. For AM, a piece following up on the IPCC, there's a big ongoing debate in New Zealand about the amount we spend on roading infrastructure. At the very moment, we should be not. So this is looking at broadly at the potential for congestion charging, particularly in Auckland and the other cities, to reduce reliance on the motor car. And I know that Veronica has a science piece coming, which I'll just briefly mention. There was an orca calf that was orphaned in Wellington recently and eventually died, had to be euthanized, I think. And it's a piece about best practice around whale strandings, of which we get a lot in New Zealand. And that's it from New Zealand.
Excellent. Thanks, Finlay. And I'll throw now to Environment and Energy with editor Nicole Hashim and her deputy Anthea Batsakis.
Hi everyone, Anthony's actually not in today, so I'll cover off. So this week I'm keeping an eye out for more follow-up angles on the IPCC climate report out last week, just to keep the coverage going. In terms of stories this week, on Thursday I've got a piece coming off research embargo on the discovery of an exceptionally large rock coral, 440 years old, in the Great Barrier Reef. Makes it the widest piece of coral ever measured in the Great Barrier Reef. And given its age, it would have survived, hundreds of cyclones and coral bleaching events and other pressures. So it's quite a remarkable discovery, and it's actually in quite good health. But the authors say that we need ongoing monitoring of it, obviously with climate change, to make sure that it remains healthy. I've also got a piece this week on new research showing how canine teeth have evolved to suit the killing behaviours of the animal. The researchers looked at about 60 predators, including polar bears and dingoes, and they found that evolution has shaped the teeth to either be sort of dagger-like for a stabbing motion, or strong enough to crunch bone, or to just tear prey apart. It's really interesting, and apparently big cats have the sharpest teeth of all in the animal kingdom, and it should be a really interesting piece, and I think there's some great illustrations and animations to go with it as well. Now, the AM piece is just a follow-on from the IPCC report last week. This one looks at the mid-range scenario for emissions put forward by the IPCC. So not the really high and terrifying path that we could take, but the most plausible one, which is between 2 and 3.5 degrees warming this century. And it basically tells us, okay, excuse me, what does the research tell us about how Earth will look under that scenario? It is a pretty bleak picture. And one of the most stark messages for me was that heat waves look like lasting for a month or more in Australia. So that was pretty alarming. And that's it from me.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicole. And I'll go now to SciTech with editor Mike Hopkin and his deputies Michael Lucy and Noor Julani.
Good morning, everybody from Perth. So on Science this week, we've got a pretty quiet week in prospect in journals, although I'm still waiting for the press release from Science this week to drop. It always comes in immediately after this meeting. So I'll let you know if there's anything big that we need to cover off that's being published in Science at the end of the week. Beyond that, I'm just going to use the week to commission some evergreen stuff and some more pieces for our Curious Kids series. The AM story on the Science section for tomorrow morning is by Catherine Kemp at UNSW. It's to do with this ACCC inquiry that they're collecting submissions for at the moment for an inquiry on Australian online retailers. And she's read all 26,000 words of the privacy terms of eBay, Amazon, and some of the local ones, Kogan. She's read it all, so you don't have to. And unsurprisingly, there's not much you can do to stop yourself being profiled and having your data shared with third-party websites. And so her submission to the ACCC is going to say that a simple change they could make would be to just make it opt-in rather than not knowing anything about it at all. So if Amazon were to say, do you consent to having your data tracked by these third-party websites, then you could just click no to it all and it'd be much better. So that's what she's written for us for AM. And Noor has the PM piece, so I might throw to Noor next.
Yep. For PM, I've got a piece that discusses second factor authentication, or 2FA, and the vulnerabilities with it. So generally 2FA is considered an added layer of security on top of your standard password, username, logins. But researchers at Deakin have run a bunch of tests and found that cyber attackers can remotely access a user's 2FA process with relatively quite little effort through the use of a popular mobile app, which they're not going to name for security reasons. But the app basically synchronizes a user's notifications across their devices. And this feature can then allow attackers to access that user's SMS and therefore bypass their 2FA authentication. So yeah, they recommend instead of 2FA, a more secure option would be to use dedicated USB hardware, such as a YubiKey device, which provides a kind of streamlined way to enable 2FA across your different services without the issues associated with SMS-based approaches. So that's the PM.
So is that weakness just with SMS 2FA?
It is for SMS 2FA, and I think specifically it's for Androids as well.
Okay, so if you were using like the kind of the authenticator app that gives you a new passcode each time, that's
they discuss the authenticator app as a viable alternative, although they do mention that there is an issue with authenticator apps as well. And so that's why they discuss that, and then they come to the YubiKey as currently being the most foolproof way to kind of, make sure that no one can, hack you too easily. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but they do discuss authenticator apps as well. And then in terms of chasing, with the IPCC report still lingering in people's minds, I was thinking of chasing a wrap of the best and worst current geoengineering proposals to help reduce global warming. So an example of some of these is spraying seawater like really high up in the air to help generate stratocumulus clouds, which then can deflect sunlight. Another example is a lot of people have proposed things such as sun shields or mirrors to reflect sunlight. And so I basically like a wrap of like the top few worst and best ideas and which are most viable logistically, considering the kind of technology and processes that they would require.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yep, that's all from me.
And have we got Michael Lucy? Oh,
yep. So Michael Lucy here, another deputy editor in Science and Technology. I'll be quick. The only piece I'll have in the next day or so is an online culture one about OK Boomer memes and how they arose and what they tell us about. The authors are sort of arguing they've looked closely at sort of thousands of TikTok videos of OK Boomer memes, and they're arguing this is sort of a key moment in the formation of Generation Z as a kind of political unit, who think of themselves as kind of a political group with interests as opposed to, boomers and other generations and so on and so forth. That's based on some research that was published just late last week, I think. Yeah. And that's it from me.
Excellent. And is that all from SciTech?
That's the lot.
Terrific. Thanks, guys. And I'll throw now to education with Sasha Petrova.
Morning. For me today, in the news, there was a piece that Noel Pearson wrote in The Australian on the weekend, and he was basically arguing that inquiry-led teaching harms students' learning. He's arguing this on the basis of a paper by John Sweller, which was published in the Centre of Independent Studies, by the Centre of Independent Studies. So Noel Pearson is basically saying, the evidence is in, inquiry-based learning is really bad. So inquiry-based learning is, as opposed to explicit learning, is where you give kind of students agency over their own learning, and you sort of give them a problem and let them figure it out themselves, as opposed to just teaching them, facts and teaching them how to solve the problem. So he's saying, and this is an age-old argument between the conservatives and kind of the left-wing education people, is that inquiry-based learning does not teach kids facts in a really efficient way, and explicit-based learning does. So I've got someone talking, Alan Reid, he's a policy expert, and I'd like him to sort of look at the fact that, first of all, in inquiry-based learning, it's not so much, teaching isn't so much about learning facts and learning new concepts. So while explicit learning will give you an efficient way of learning new concepts, there's a lot more to education that is about critical thinking. It's about finding ways to solve a problem. It's not about knowing, how to get from A to B and being told that and remembering that. It's also about trying to figure it out yourself. So the evidence is in that explicit teaching does actually help you learn new concepts faster. And so they always keep quoting that evidence. But there is more to education than learning new concepts. So I guess that's what I want Alan to sort of unpack.
Just a thought there, was Noel Pearson talking about that in relation to teaching Indigenous kids?
Yeah, so, sorry, what's that? Was he talking about that in relation?
Yeah, in relation to teaching Indigenous kids or just kids in general?
Well, he's saying, John Swaller's paper was about kids in general, but Noel Pearson has that institute up in Cape York where he uses a much stronger type of explicit learning. It's called direct instruction. And yes, that does help. It really does help Indigenous kids, but I guess it's because they're coming from a very low level from severe disadvantage. So yes, there is a lot of evidence to show that direct instruction does help kids in disadvantaged communities. But that doesn't mean that overall, that's the only way that we should be teaching kids, and inquiry needs to be scrapped and all that kind of stuff. It's just a very flawed argument in general with this kind of black and white sort of us versus them thing, and education is never really going to go forward unless people kind of can see that there's more to it than their own kind of, whatever they're arguing. Anyway, so I'll be chasing that. And then for the morning, I've got a piece on ventilation in classrooms and how that could aid in spreading COVID. so the guy's talking about the fact that it's not a coincidence that most of the outbreaks in schools that have started in schools have started in winter, where when the windows are closed. So schools generally rely on natural ventilation, which is opening windows. And then mechanical ventilation is sort of not really on par with the kind of standard that we need, with an adequate standard. So he's just talking about what schools actually need to do. And the main thing is to have a monitor for, what does it say, a CO2 monitor, where you can, a CO2 meter rather, sorry, where you can measure the amount of carbon dioxide that people exhale. And if it goes over a certain amount, then, you need to actually take measures and increase the air conditioning and things like that. Yeah, so that'll be for the morning.
Cool. And did you see the EY report out this morning about university funding?
I did. I did see it, and I thought about that, and I thought, this is stuff that we've done like over and over and over again, and they haven't said anything new other than unis might disappear or have to merge or have to just focus on specific areas of study rather than have all these kind of single subjects. So all of that we've done in the past, and the Mitchell Institute actually reckons that they won't have to merge. And the thing is, like, we could get the Mitchell Institute to talk about the fact that, they reckon they're not going to merge, but it's all speculation, all of this, and all we keep running is, we think this is going to happen, we think this is going to happen. And of course it's important to speculate and to kind of look forward, but I just feel like there's not really anything new in that to chase, unless you feel it is. But I mean, there's no specific evidence for anything. They didn't rely on anything specifically. They just kind of came up with their own forecast of what's going to happen. And there's, a billion people who have done these forecasts. We've kind of canvassed them, from every different angle.
Misha, what do you think? It was something Misha raised with me this morning. Are you keen to get something on this report?
I wouldn't mind. Maybe Sasha, just I sort of take your point, but just have a bit of a call around and just see what any of your higher ed academics say about this report, and if there's any aspect that throws it forward. If not, I think happy to leave it, but it'd just be interesting to hear. It wasn't clear from the reports who commissioned the report, if it was a Universities Australia commission or a particular university. Mitchell Institute's quoted there. So I wouldn't mind finding out who commissioned it and if there is anything new in it.
Yeah, Mitchell Institute wouldn't have commissioned it. I think they were just quoted because they've done a lot of these estimations in the past. I'll definitely have a look. I might just talk to Peter Hurley from Mitchell as well and just see what he has to say.
Yeah.
Cool. The only other thing that was of interest this morning was the piece in the Oz about selective entry schools. I don't know if you saw, in the Age, did I say the Oz? Just sort of, have we ever done a piece on, kind of what the purpose of these schools is? Like, why do they exist? Were they sort of meant to be for disadvantaged kids who couldn't get into your Wesleys and your St. Kevin's? Because that's clearly not what's happening.
Essentially they are. And I mean, every single piece that we do on selective schools are saying that they select advantage, so there's kind of no point to them. So that is the argument that keeps being run. And we did do a piece on selective schools about a month ago saying, are they really worth it? And kind of going through the things that show that they're not. And one of them is that they select select advantage. Yeah, the proportion of disadvantaged students is very low.
Yeah. All right, that sounds good. Thanks. All right, thanks, Sasha. And I'll go now to Arts and Culture with Susie Freeman-Green and Jane Howard. Have we got Susie on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Hi, good morning, everyone. So over in arts, we're just regrouping a little bit because unfortunately so many arts events have been put on hold due to lockdown. We're kicking off a little series this week, just a fun series where a number of our leading writers write about a television series that's getting them through lockdown, starting with a piece by an literature academic that's actually spent 25 years watching The Bold and the Beautiful. And I have never seen an episode of it, so I will find it interesting to edit this show. This apparently, due to COVID restrictions, the actors in the show are now kissing mannequins most of the time. So the acting is even more wooden than the episode was. So I'm looking forward to that one. And we've got a few other pieces coming in that. We're also going to be just working on more of our unique products that we do in arts and culture, which are timeless, things like our guides to the classics that look at classic works of literature, Decoding the Music Masterpieces series, which unpacks the musicology of noted classical music works, and also finding more candidates for our Hidden Women of History series, which has proven to be quite popular and is sort of refocusing on women who've been lost to history. These are all delightfully timeless, so very useful to be wheeling out at a time when there's so little happening in the arts. In terms of what is happening in the arts, quite a lot of new televisions coming in, and we've got a review coming this week of the new Lane Moriarty series, 9 Perfect Strangers, which is premiering on Amazon. The Guardian unfortunately jumped the gun today with their review, but we will have ours very soon. We also have, for PM today, I've got the journalist Helen Vatsakopoulos, who herself is a former TV reporter and, in fact, newsreader. She's going to review the new ABC series, The Newsreader, for us. She has fond memories herself of that period in journalism. Big hair, big shoulder pads, quite a lot of sexism. And our AM tomorrow is by the Indigenous economic historian, Professor Heidi Norman. She's reviewing the new documentary Ablaze, which is a biopic of the Indigenous civil rights activist and artist Bill Onus, which features a lot of really interesting new footage. She's doing that one for us. In the news, Ernie Sigley has died. I'm pretty happy just to leave it at that. He's for those that may not remember him, a television comedian from a long time ago.
Was he a singer too? Did Ernie Sigley sing?
I don't want to remember.
Okay. He had the best-selling Australian
I'm
single
cringing.
of the year, which was with Denise Drysdale, and it was Hey Paula.
Yes, well, I'm happy to
mind
read
you,
that
it
one.
is once reminded of it, it's very hard to forget for those who heard it the first.
Thanks, Peter, for reminding us of it. So look, I'm happy to let that one go unless anyone feels strongly. We do some obituaries, but we can't do everyone. And that's probably all from me. I think Jane has a couple of other things to mention.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jane. I'm one of the Deputy Arts and Culture Editors based in Adelaide. Just a fun thing that I'm chasing that hopefully I'll be able to get up. I don't know if anyone's been watching White Lotus. It's pretty, lots of terrible characters, but they're reading really good books. So I'm putting together a reading guide of the books read in White Lotus. The last episode will come out in about 2 hours Australian time. But I've put together a list of there's already a list of books out there, but no one's done a proper sort of reading guide to what the books are. So getting in touch with a bunch of different authors, getting people to write specifically in their field.
And so do the books they're reading tie into the show?
Yeah, so I think they're reading things like Freud and Nietzsche and Judith Butler, and then the character is reading Malcolm Gladwell. So there's definitely a commentary through the books, but I'm mostly just looking at someone to write about what the books are specifically.
Yeah. Cool. That sounds good. And that's all from arts?
Yeah, that's all from me.
Terrific. Thanks both. I'll go now to multimedia with Cynthia Wijaya.
Hi all, I'm Cynthia, the Deputy Multimedia Editor. So as Ali mentioned earlier, our multimedia editor Wes is on leave this whole week. So my first priority is to get all the multimedia, the graphs and the tables done. And aside from that, I do have a few video projects that I'll be working on as well. One of them is the Who Would Win video series, which is an animation video series between bald eagle versus wedge-tailed eagle, which is exciting and fun. But yeah, first things first is to get all the graphs and the table done. So that's it for me, I guess.
Excellent. Thanks, Cynthia. And last but not least, I'll throw to our audience development team. So the head of that team is Tessa Ogle, and she works with Ben Clark.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning. My name's Tess. I'm the acting digital editor. So our on-site numbers have been healthy over the last week. They're a little bit lower than this time last month, but it was an exceptionally high month. So all good there. We had really great engagement on Instagram over the last week. We got over 2,500 new followers, which is great, and mostly attributed to our coverage on the IPCC report and our vaccine coverage, our At a Glance and 10 Ways You Can Help the Climate got over 80,000 views. And our post on I can still get COVID after I'm vaccinated, so why should I get vaccinated, reached over 100,000 people, and we attained over 1,000 followers just from that one post. That was based on Fran's piece. And a suggestion from Lisa, so that was awesome. And just for the week ahead, I'm wondering if we do an explainer on the organisational makeup of the Taliban. I don't want to overload Cynthia, but if we could have an infographic, that might be really valuable for readers too, to help them visualise.
So I asked Justin earlier in the conference to get that piece, so I think he's going to chase someone on that this week.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll have a chat to Cynthia if she has time for an infographic. Cool. And that's all from me. Do you have anything, Ben?
Yes, I'll be very quick. I just want to give a quick shout out to Tim, whose piece on the survey of on vaccine incentives took out 2 of the top 3 posts that we had on socials. So that one went really, really well. Another one that went really, really well on Twitter was the, as Tess mentioned, on Instagram, the 10 ways that you can help the climate. So that's just a bit of a reminder, I guess, to editors. If you can think of any creative ways to resurface old pieces, that all came about from Nicole, mentioning to us, hey, this could be an opportunity to resurface some content. So if you've got any milestones or dates or news events, anything that we can resurface some old content, it can, sometimes they take out, the top socials post or in the top 10 of the week. So it's a great opportunity to get some more reads to your older pieces. And that's pretty much it for me. I'll just say that Cynthia and Peter, I might have a chat to you as well about the Economist survey. Tess and I are on a bit of an infographic kick at the moment. So if we've got some good little infographics there, we could put those on socials too. Yeah, that's pretty much all from me. Thanks, guys.
Great, thanks, Ben. And I like the Wes Mountain artwork in your background there, Tessa. Strategically placed, well done.
Thank you. Product placement.
All right, well, that's all of our sections. So that wraps us up for this morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So the editors and I are going to head off now and hit the phones, but I believe our guests will have their questions answered now by Lisa and Misha. But I think, Tim, are you going to jump in the interim?
Hey, thanks, Ali. Yes. Well, thanks so much. And all I wanted to say was a couple of quick things. Again, privileged to be a part of this. I feel really, really honoured, and the comments coming through from the Zoom webinar is testament to the how impressed everybody else was, and it's terrific to be able to be a part of it. The only thing I was going to do is I'm going to throw a poll up to anyone that's on the webinar there, just saying, give us a bit of a rating. That'll always help with what you like and don't like, that sort of thing. And also, I might throw in the chat there a link to Innovation Week. As I said, there's another 20 events happening in the next few days. If you enjoyed this, there might be some other kernels of wisdom in there for you, and we'd love for you to join us. So that's all I had to say, Ali, and thanks for having us as a part of it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Misha, I think you can talk.
So I think you can go ahead. I beg your pardon. Thanks, Mish.
That's all right. I was just muted there for a minute. Yeah, so look, I hope everybody got something from that. I guess the key thing now maybe is to work through any questions. And I think we've got our questions via chat. So Susan, do you want to just sort of throw the questions at us and we'll decide, amongst Lisa and me who to answer them. Just to introduce us, my name is Misha Ketchell. I'm the editor. My colleague Lisa Watts is here. Lisa is the CEO of The Conversation, both in Australia, and Lisa also leads sort of our arm, which works with our colleagues overseas. So we've got teams in the UK, Spain, France, US, Canada, Indonesia, Africa. And that's something else that we can talk about a little bit, but I guess we're going to focus mostly on Australia today. So questions, Susan?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the ones that actually pertain just to our conference. So our first one is from Nora. There's some comments as well, but I'm going to read them out because they're very nice. Nora says, this is excellent and very impressive to see how all this comes together in my mailbox first thing every morning. I was wondering when there are any breaking or urgent news stories overnight, which might affect your cover or lead story in the next morning's newsletter, how do you manage that? Also, on a side note, this has become my favourite news source lately. Having been a journalist ages ago, I really appreciate how you all do this as a team. Thanks, Nora.
Great. Thank you. Yes, that's very nice. And it's a great question because when news breaks overnight, the short answer is how do we handle it? It's with great difficulty because our team isn't working overnight. So what we do is we have an editor who gets up in the morning, who sends out our morning newsletter, and it's their job to try to take on board any major news that's happened overnight that we might need to mention or take into account in the newsletter that we send out. Generally, we're not going to have time to commission a new piece, but what we might be able to do is note it and let readers know that coverage is coming, and then we'll sort of start work from early in the morning on the piece the next day. So we're actually not commissioning, between about probably 7 o'clock the night before and 7 a.m. the next morning. We don't have people who are on duty at that time.
Might be worth mentioning though, with the international colleagues, across the 8 or 9 editions, there'll be lots on Afghanistan, etc. So we'll probably be doing a lot of copy sharing for global type events, but if it's local, yeah.
Chris says, this is such a wonderful look behind the curtain. Thanks for opening this up for us. Just curious, is this a daily or weekly check-in?
So this one that everybody saw today is weekly. So this is the one we do every Monday where the whole team is together. What happens every other day, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, is the Chief of Staff has a meeting with each section individually. So Ali will meet with the arts section, the business section, the politics section. And the reason that we do that is without sort of a whole room of, 25 or 30 people sitting there, you get a chance to really talk about ideas in more detail and sort of some of the nuance of how you might present an idea, how you might develop a story. So this one is sort of the big check-in, which has got a little bit of pre-planning for the week ahead. And then we do more detailed individual meetings throughout the week.
All right, a couple of questions about the conversation. Bob Seagraves, pardon me if I didn't pronounce your last name correctly, said, could you please explain the background to the conversation in Melbourne Connect? How are they set up? And Dennis Robertson would like to know who funds the conversation.
Sounds like one for me.
Yeah.
I think the first question is about the history of the conversation and Melbourne Connect. It's a relatively new one in the sense that although the conversation's been established for over a decade now, it started from the University of Melbourne and a consortium of leading universities in Australia, and then became a sector-wide project. So it's now funded by 46 universities in Australia and New Zealand, as well as philanthropy, so grants, funds, etc., and lots of individual readers giving large and small amounts. And we are, I guess we've always had a connection. We've always been on campus at the University of Melbourne, and our interstate editors, so For example, Sunny, who came and went, who's doing breaking news out of Sydney, she's usually at UTS, and Mark, who's in UWA, he's at the University of Western Australia, has a desk there. So our university partners really, hopefully, and mostly see themselves as being sort of custodians and owners and partners of the conversation. As a non-profit, they're our shareholders, our partners, our content providers. So we've always had that connection in Melbourne with the University of Melbourne because of proximity. And when the chance came to move into Melbourne Connect building, we sort of jumped at it because it's perfect for us. So we're moving into that space when our office is finished, which hopefully will be only a few months' time, and hope to be able to do lots more of these sorts of things with Melbourne Connect and have a stronger community that way.
Peter Laver would like to know what proportion of articles are invited by editors compared with articles submitted by authors seeking publication?
Yeah, it's a good question. What you heard then, because it's our sort of daily news planning conference, which is everything that's off the news, was probably more a focus on things that are in the news agenda that we're commissioning. But there's also a steady stream of article pitches from academics. We get hundreds and hundreds of pitches every week. And I'd probably say it would skew slightly more towards the news coverage, but only slightly. So maybe about 60-40 sort of articles commissioned off the news to articles that come through pitch. But that will change day to day, week to week. So it's sort of variable depending on what's going on.
Catherine Weller said, can you do this live every week? It's a fantastic transparency and amazing for students. And her question is, what advice can you give to academics on how best to work with journalists? The on, off record, on background, fast turnarounds are a whole new language.
Well, it's not, we can't do this particular event every week, but we do open up our news conferences often for particular groups, academics, people that want to come along. And so if you are interested in organising for a group to join news conference, you can talk to Susan, and that might be something that we can organise if you've got a particular group that wants some insight into how we work. The off the record, on the record language and dealing with media, having worked in media for 25 years, including for a long period of time at Media Watch, where I was working with journalists, trying to get them to often talk off the record and on the record on a background. It's incredibly complicated. Different journalists have different approaches to how they think about these things. Generally speaking, there's supposed to be a set of rules, which is that off the record is information that is provided to you that actually not only can you not source it to the person, but you can't report the information itself. Information that's provided on background, by distinction, is generally information that you can include in your reporting, but you can't attribute to the person who gave it to you. A lot of journalists get confused between those two, off the record and on background, and a lot of people trip up on it. So I would say if you're ever talking to a journalist, just be ultra careful and clear with them about what the basis, the information you're sort of exchanging, you know, what basis you're doing it on, because there's no clear sense of the definitions of those things.
Julie Riley, we're getting into more editorial areas now. Julie Riley wants to know if you're interested in including advice on how people concerned about women and girls in Afghanistan can use their philanthropic charitable dollars to help. Not sure what your policy is around directing giving.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if we were to do that, it does open up a lot of questions for us ethically in terms of there's always a question about the role of journalism versus the role of advocacy, or the role of intervening in something to, you know, achieve certain outcomes. And then if we were to be recommending, say, for example, particular charities or organisations that people give to, we'd have, I think, a duty of care to go through a process of checking them out and ensuring that they're behaving in an ethical way, that they're managing money ethically, that they're meeting certain criteria and standards. So that's not something that we do currently as a matter of course. We see our role as providing information on which people can base their decisions but not actually trying to push people to do particular things. That's not to say that we would never do it in any circumstances, but I think it's an area that you'd want to enter with a little bit of care and caution if you did.
Okay. John Day said, we don't see so many fact check articles. Are these welcomed by the conversation? And do you make a pitch in the same way as a normal article pitch? He also wants to know, is there a way non-academic writers can contribute into articles rather than just as an acknowledgement at the end?
So with fact checks were all the vogue about 10 years ago. And really, you've seen, I guess, in recent years, a rising discourse around the way in which social media spreads misinformation, in particular Facebook, but also other social media outlets. And part of the way those companies have responded is to say, well, free speech, user-generated content, people are free to say whatever they want, but we're going to spend some money on fact-checking, which is going to, debunk misinformation, and we're going to spend some information on what they call digital media literacy, which basically means training people to pick out bad information. My view is that both of those measures are sort of fig leaves that actually aren't very effective. Digital media literacy is literally just saying to people, we've jumbled up good information and bad information. It's your job to sort it out, and we're going to hope that you can do it. All the evidence shows that that's very unsuccessful, that people really struggle to, in a day-to-day way where there's a lot of information coming at them, sort out what's reliable and what's not. So I sort of have little faith in that. I also have little faith in fact checks per se, because what it tends to happen when you fact check, say, a claim by a politician or a public figure, and you say it's wrong or it's right, is you tend to get people that already agree with you sort of cheering it on, and people that don't agree with that particular view or that particular perception tend to ignore it. So I don't think it has as much positive impact on public discourse as you would hope. So over the years, we've steered away from doing articles that are branded as fact checks to doing more just our standard articles, which are sort of explanatory on key issues. But the reality is, in a way, that they're all always checking facts. What we're trying to do is get the academic expertise on whatever the question of the day is. And we feel doing that in a way that isn't framed as gotcha or you got it wrong, but just framed as we're trying to give you quality information, is the best way of delivering sort of what you would call effectively fact check content.
Fiona McGregor said, with such a tight turnaround, how do you manage fact checking, subbing, etc.? And Peter Laver said, do you have a lawyer to check defamation liability, etc. before you publish?
We do. So we've got Richard Leader from Cause Chambers Westgarth. They're our pro bono legal advisors. They're extraordinarily generous because we do contact them at all times of the day and night to check things that we're nervous about. And they have to do a huge amount of work just making sure we don't get into legal trouble. We do have a fact-checking process. So every editor is required to go through a process of checking information provided by academics where it is checkable. We also do, to some extent, rely on the academics in their areas of expertise, where sometimes they're things that are sort of beyond our capacity as general journalists, and we're relying on their sort of expert knowledge as well. But between all of that, we do everything we can possibly to ensure that the information that we publish, that we inject into the sort of the public discourse, is reliable. And then if we do discover that we've made an error, we've got a really strong policy of just correcting quickly and transparently and rigorously, because we sort of see our role as ensuring that the public debate is founded on reliable information. So if we do make a mistake, we want to make sure that we make every step we possibly can to undo it as quickly as possible.
This is one we get quite a bit. Do you have a policy around political stances, i.e. do you try and remain apolitical, or do you allow your journalists space to make their own views known?
Generally speaking, the question doesn't arise for our journalists because they're very rarely writing under their bylines. They're editing the work of academics, and the academics will have a range of views on topics, and we allow academics to express their views insofar as they are based on evidence and they are informed analysis. So if you're an academic who's writing, say, about asylum seeker policy, and you've studied asylum seeker policy for 10 or 15 years, and you've got a view about what has been shown to be effective or ineffective in that area, we don't have an objection to an academic expressing a view on that policy question. What we do have an objection to, and what we'll edit out, is anything that's partisan. So anything that's particularly attacking one side of politics or the other, or trying to score cheap political points. Our content is all about informing the audience, and the key point is we want our audience to be more informed when they finish reading an article than they were when they started. That's sort of the key objective.
So Ingrid says, does each editor or deputy section editor simply decide what gets put up, or do multiple editors have to agree before something is up? I guess what I'm wondering is how much autonomy each section has to put articles up.
We try to give the section editors quite a degree of autonomy in the sense that they've got a lot of deep expertise in their subject matter area. So our health team is very much across all the debates, say, about COVID-19 epidemiology and what's been said and what the next angle or part of that story is that we want to put up. And also we'll have a very strong idea of who the key experts are in that area. So we do allow section editors quite a degree of autonomy to drive an agenda, but in newsrooms, it's always hierarchical. So all the section editors report to the chief of staff, and the chief of staff ultimately reports to the editor. And we do have some say in terms of shaping that content, just to make sure that key topics aren't missed and that the key things we want to cover off do get covered off, just so that we serve our readers well.
Jason Proposh says, is anyone doing anything on the cost of financially incentivising people to be vaccinated? What this says about our culture, the impact on community decision-making for other important health and policy matters, and how this will be viewed by people who have been vaccinated without having to be incentivised.
Yes, in actual fact, there's a piece that led the newsletter this morning on exactly that topic by some behavioural economists. And that article is looking at different forms of incentives, so lotteries, cash, different ways of thinking about encouraging people to get the vaccine. And basically, it argues that the insights of behavioural economics are that, to some extent, cash incentives like the $300 proposed by the opposition are likely to be less effective than certain nudge type approaches. I hope I'm summarising that article reasonably well. It's our lead article today, so best to go and read it as well. And we'll be doing more on this topic too. It's a really important topic. So the behavioural economists aren't the last word on it.
Catherine Weller says, is there a way to measure your reach into communities who shun mainstream media? Watching COVID and vaccine misinformation spread, there's a trend of people using alternate experts as sources, but it's hard for them to know what research is good or bad. Do you have a transparent way of choosing who your experts are?
Do you want to take that, Lisa?
Yeah, it's such an important question. It's one we're spending so much time thinking about at the moment, particularly as we're in discussions with the large social media platforms as part of the government's news bargaining code, which seeks to sort of get them to support media more broadly. And look, the one thing about the conversation that's unique and special is that we only allow experts who have experience and expertise in their topic to write on that topic. So a geologist can't write about a social issue, for example. It's not enough just to be a university academic. You have to actually have demonstrated expertise in that area. But I think the point of the question is really fascinating, because I'm seeing more and more in terms of disinformation and misinformation on social platforms like particularly Facebook and YouTube, where it's very easy to roll out other experts, even some of them attached to universities, who might have a view that is plainly wrong and dangerous. And so I think there's probably a role that we can play in this next phase of this battle we're in to explain a bit more about the fundamental underlying research methodology, is this a survey? Is this a experiment that's been done in certain circumstances? When we're going back to the evidence, actually putting a bit more of a spotlight on that for some of our pieces, I think would be a good contribution, because there's experts and there's experts, and it can be very confusing for the regular citizens out there if they're, having an argument with someone on social media about, expert A says this and expert B says that. So there's more work that we can do there for sure.
Patrick says, this was wonderful. Thanks for being so candid, entertaining and valuable. Are you able to take story pictures from non-academics, i.e. PR comms professionals, or are you only able to speak directly with researchers and academics?
Just academics, really. I mean, we get pictures from comms people. The difficulty is it's really hard because we only publish articles if an academic with expertise wants to write on that topic. So it's very, very rare that we would pick up something from that stream of pictures.
Leslie Faulkner Rose wants to know, what's your pitch to publication ratio, please?
God, that's the perennial question. It changes. We did a snapshot at one point. It was about 3 in 10. So we were picking up about 3 in 10. I would say that in some sections it would be 1 in 10 or less at the moment, depending on what's happening at the time. So that means that for every 10 pitches, we probably pick up 1. Yeah.
And look, in a way, it's because of the size of the editorial operation. So you heard earlier in the news conference, somebody, I think Peter Martin in economics, wanted to have a sort of cartoon at the head of a story he was working on. But Wes, who is our single illustrator, he's away this week, so that won't be happening. Whereas, if we had a bit more scale in some of the key areas, we might be able to expand potential to pick up more pictures, but it's just a circumstance of scale and size.
Faith Tabalujan says, thanks so much for this insider view into your work. My question is, how can a current university student pursuing a career in journalism like me get involved with the conversation? Are there any particular experiences or skills essential if I was to apply for an internship or employment opportunity?
So I guess the answer is we do have an intern program, which has been very successful. A lot of students have been involved in that program. And in actual fact, quite a few of our staff have come through as interns, including Ali Hansen, who is the Chief of Staff, who you saw running news conference today. She's a former intern. In fact, there's probably about 4 or 5 on our team who are former interns who are now working with us. The program has been slowed down a little bit by COVID in the past sort of year or so, but I think we are looking at our next intake. So I would definitely suggest applying for an internship. Susan, I forget how you actually do that. Is there a particular email address at the moment, or how do we?
I don't know, but I can find out. If people want to email me.
Yeah, we can put you in touch with the right person if you're interested. And yeah, we'll be doing an intake. Hopefully, we'll be back to something a bit more normal, and we'll be running our internship program from at least next year.
I think the best email address is partnerships@theconversation.edu.au. So if you just email me there, I'll find out for you. Sarah B said, at the start of the pandemic, there were a few articles outlining how destruction of the environment had made the spread of pandemics more likely. And so connecting the climate crisis to the increased likelihood of pandemics, but that focus seems to have gone from the narrative. Did you get any feedback on how people felt about this, whether they believe there was a connection? And do you feel there is a need to try and help people understand what's needed to prevent other pandemics rather than just focusing on what to do to get through this one?
Oh, look, it's a great
big
point.
Editorial question.
Yeah, look, it's a great point. I mean, the difficulty with any point like that is just finding a way of making it fresh. You can't just say the same thing again and again and again. So we've done everything we can to try to highlight those links. In fact, there are a lot of experts on, zoonotic, viruses who talk about the conditions that climate change have created that make that sort of scenario more likely. Currently, we did a panel discussion, I think, earlier this year or maybe late last year on that very topic. So yes, it's an important thing to highlight. We highlight it whenever we can, whenever the opportunity arises. To some extent, we're a little bit hostage to the news cycle, so we try to work around where these issues come up, where there's opportunities to sort of highlight the research. It's about the best answer I can give, really.
Okay, well, we have to wrap up. One last question. How do I pitch to the conversation?
Okay, so you have to be an academic, first of all. And if you're an academic, you can create a profile on our website, and there's a pitch button that you can use that will guide you through the process, where you can basically explain very quickly what your story is about, what your expertise is, and what you're planning to write for us.
And the pitch button's on the right-hand side of our homepage, about 2/3 of the way down. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It was
yeah,
I'm sorry we couldn't see you, but because there's quite a few of you, I think we sort of had to do it this way. But it was great that you all came today, and thanks for the lovely feedback as well. That was terrific to hear.
Yeah, very good.
And thank you for hosting at Melbourne Connect.
Yes, thank you, Melbourne Connect.
Thank you.
Thanks again.